Great peace, great peace, great peace, Shakoki. So I have a book right here, Medical Apartheid. I want to talk about this in a second. Um, but before I do that, I want to say this. My prayers go out to the family in Omaha, Nebraska, who just lost their 19-year-old son to another cop shooting. The family, the young man, there's Bantu Somali, so we don't really get to hear about Bantu Somalis, but um, obviously you can see there's a history shared there with African Americans and the Afro-Asiatic people in Africa, right? The Bantu-speaking tribe, it comes from that Mogadishu region. But, again, as you can see, the cop shootings, they haven't been de-escalated. You know what I mean? They haven't been de-escalated. This comes on the back of George Floyd, that anniversary, right? I don't know what they're going to do about this, man. Like all these shootings, by cops. Even if the young man was in the wrong, even if he wasn't, a cop is always supposed to render the life of the person who may need procedural help. If it's an incident where they're called to the scene and it's mental health, they need to know how to de-escalate that. They said he had a firearm in the car, so they haven't released the camera footage. And again, like I have to say this, man, because like I'm an agri-scientist. You can't keep getting away with saying, the footage may be limited because like it doesn't capture field vision, it doesn't capture angles. Like they need to stop that. You know what I mean? Like we have Space Force engineering capabilities out here. So if someone gets shot or someone does something that injures someone, whether they be a cop or not, the arsenals, they have to inquire about that. They have to go into the satellites and see what actually happened. There's nothing on this planet that isn't recorded. Nothing. Those little cameras that they want to come out and update and feature and release, say, oh, this is 6.6 pixel. Like, that's not a camera. You know what I mean? That's limited technology. Like, the cameras are the satellites. You know what I mean? Satellites capture footage at all angles, at all definitions. At speeds that are unfathomable. You know what I mean? Like, satellites don't get hot. You know what I mean? Like a camera gets hot, right? And then it gives out. Satellites don't. Like, all this scientific research about minerals and, the application of the source of it, right? Just think like if you have soil and you leave it laying around, it's either going to produce or it's going to just stay stable. You know what I mean? So they got away with that, right? They got away with that. And, like Trump, he just met with an African head of state. You know what I mean? Like, what are they doing about this stuff, man? Like, like, what are they doing about it? Like, how do you let a 19-year-old get shot by the police? Like, how do you allow that to happen? Like they tried to say the guy Porter, who's in Detroit. I think his name was Porter Burks or something like that. He was called on for having a schizophrenic episode. Cops shot him because he had a knife in his hand. There's many different ways to de-escalate a situation where a person has a knife in his hand within seconds. So, like, either they need to hire personnel that's, like they could have tased the kid, right? They could have tased him. The knife would have fell out his hand. Like, even that, I don't even condone even tasing people, right? You look at all these other countries that deal with conflict resolution. It never goes to the degree where someone is standing in the middle of the street with a gun or a knife. It never goes to that degree. It never goes to that degree. You look at all these African countries and they experience high levels of trauma due to migrations and forced assimilations from other nations. They're not over there losing their minds like people in America are, and they have more to lose. Like, they were just talking about this on College Show last night that, if we lose West Africa, you can forget about it, You can forget about it if we lose West Africa, And like me, I'm not trying to be on the ground figuring out what's going on, what's happening here, what's happening there. I'm not trying to do that, because it's clear, like, how is it that you lose something that's yours? Either you weren't trying to work hard to keep it, or you just wasn't asking for help. Like it's not clear to me. You know what I mean? It's not clear to me. Like, you look at a place like Togo, right? And their heads of state is constantly being persecuted by the public because the government is not being ran well. So if the government is not being ran well, at what point do you say we need to step our media game up? We need to step our media game up. But it isn't. You don't hear from people from Togo. So it's like, if they start losing their states over there, like, what's next? Like, what's next? Like, the only thing I fear is that the world becomes so mixed that tribes start to use their identity, nations start to use their sovereignty, people start to lose their language. That's what I fear. I fear people assimilating so much that they forget who they are, Because, like, I can say this right now, like, if I were to walk around my neighborhood and a police see me and he stops me or she stops me, like, there's not going to be no one from my community who's going to come outside and say, hey, start speaking in their language, and I understand it, and the police don't understand it, and the police somehow gets told by their higher superiors, on a radio signal, right? Disperse. Base in effect. You know what I mean? Like, if someone stops me, in a police squadron, and I'm in front of someone else who's from another country and we don't speak the same language, like, how does that look? And that happens a lot in poor income communities. How does that work? So I did a 10-minute video about this, and I want to say this, man. Black people, you got to step up. You're not supposed to let a Somali get ambushed by a cop. You're not supposed to let that happen. If you're in a community and you see something happening that's involving law enforcement, you need to pull your cameras out. Like, you need to calm that situation down in all matters. You need to calm it down. You see a cop being aggressive, you need to interfere. You see the suspect or the victim, escalating the situation, you need to help the cop. You know what I mean? You need to help the cop. So, like, at some point we have to, like, pull the tags of, these chambers, these local chambers, right? That kind of allow police to do what they want to do. You know what I mean? Because I've said this over and over, most of the cops who are on the force, they're Arabs, not from an ethnic sense, but from a logical sense, because we know how most Arabs prototypically look, and we know how they look modernly, right? If you're someone who studies haploids, we know how Arabs look, right? So not just the ones who are highly admixtured with Greek, not them, right? Your Palestinians, your Persians, your Yemen, not them. I'm talking about the Afro-Asiatics, even the Janissaries, the white ones. We know how Arabs look, and they're all on the police force. So we need to do something about, cops ambushing innocent people. We need to do something about that. You know what I mean? Like, people need to really stand up and say enough is enough. And I think, like, a lot of us are taking that action because, like, we're not calling the cops because, if something happens in a community, we try to de-escalate it ourselves. We don't call the cops, This is why people are taking up arms. Like, if someone steps on their property or something like that, you defend it. You know what I mean? But again, people have to get security systems in their homes so you can see who's coming by the house, who's stepping on your farm, who's vandalizing your property. You need to know these things, Great peace, Yakoki.